Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Vlad Mukhachev. He's the founder of TGR, or the Green Republic, a Web3 agency. He's the founder of Kreoverse, an AI chatbot agency, and he's also working on a project called Pangea Pass, which basically puts your passport onto your phone. He's working in an amazing area where we have a wide-ranging discussion. We chat about things like AI, where it's going, the projects he's working on, the state of Web3, and where he thinks that's going and what's going to happen there, and his thought process behind why he studied what he studied, how he wanted to become a founder, and so many things in between. It's an amazing conversation. I really hope you enjoy it. I know I did. Enjoy the show. Hey Vlad, thanks for joining me today. You've worked on some interesting projects and I'm excited to get into all of them. But before we do, I'd like to go back to the initial moment when you decided that you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So paradoxically, just I guess as a short introduction, obviously I'm Vlad. And funny enough, I graduated from the University of Manchester and I did environmental management. So you could even say, how is that even related to, me mostly, I guess, as a tech entrepreneur, right? Like with all of these apps, with all of these projects. But I really understood, actually even before joining university that I actually want to, work on my projects and do something myself. That's number one. But I didn't want to go and do something like, business management, entrepreneurship as a course at university, because I don't know why, but I was always like very, very, I always just like knew that it's not something like you can really learn. So instead I thought, hey, and this whole sustainability wave was happening. And I thought I would go into something more practical because, in essence, environmental management is actually a lot about analytics. It's a lot about growth. For example, in our case, we would analyze like air pollution, noise pollution. And that's actually was the moment when we would get into some of the technical apps. And you might think, that's very like far off. But we also like analyze, for example, in Manchester, like urban growth. So you would get to analyze, which area would be growing, which area would be declining. So I guess like, from early on, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, like just knowing I wanted to work on my own projects. But at university, I kind of like started getting into sort of let's call it the technical bits really, and kind of like understanding, what I enjoy, what I don't enjoy so much. So even though once again, environmental management seems like very, very far off, that's how I got into this. I mean, that's how the journey started, you could say, really, that sort of point at university.
Wow, it seems like you were quite strategic in terms of your trajectory quite early on, and not many people have that thought process behind like what degree they're going to do, or knowing early on that they want to be in entrepreneurship. Like for me, I just did my degree because it sounded impressive and didn't give as much thought to it. And then looking back, I'm like, well, it's not as useful to me as I would have hoped. Where do you think that sort of strategizing came from? Has that always been something you've done throughout your life?
Yeah, honestly, I think that was always the case. Like, I don't know, it probably sounds a bit, kind of like cheesy saying, yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur. Like, I always felt like that. But to be honest with you, I guess it's more kind of like this aspect of being creative, being, sort of self-driven. I think that's another, sort of word, to use. And yeah, like the funny thing, what I remember, like even when I didn't know like what I would do exactly, right? Like, what I would sell, what I would build, I was always more kind of like in the, sort of this mode of, let me try something, let me try to, organize something, put the, two pieces together and then see what works out, that kind of stuff. And even, going back to, once again, the course I was doing, honestly, like the reason why I was going, doing environmental management, even talking about urban growth, in my head, it was like, it would be cool to learn about like how you could predict future, meaning that if you know which area is going to grow, you can build a shopping center there. You can launch a food delivery app. So that was the thinking behind it. And once again, to kind of like highlight this once again. I didn't know at uni what I was going to do and like, what is the venture going to be. But I was trying to be as tactical, I guess, as I could be around like choosing the thing I want to do. And that's why I went for environmental management. I know this is probably not the common reasoning behind choosing something like this, but that was my case, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's not. And it is
Yeah.
pretty impressive that
Well,
you had that type of thinking quite early on. Being an entrepreneur is considered very risky. How would you describe your relationship with risk?
it's funny how obviously entrepreneurship is risky as kind of like in general, because only 1 to 5% max sort of projects succeed and whatever you do really, right? But to be honest with you, I actually lately very often think that entrepreneurship is often about minimizing risk in general. So of course the macro is, yes, you take risk to do something kind of like new, something you want to work on. But then during sort of throughout your whole journey, you actually minimize risk because let's say you're working, for example, we're working on this app, Pangea, and I'm sure we'll dive into this later. So my thinking around risk is like, how do we minimize risk so that we could achieve more things? Meaning that, I'm not even like thinking about sort of, like success and all of that stuff, but more like, how do I minimize risk of like of using capital inefficiently? How do I minimize risk of going wrong? So actually, a lot of my thinking is more around minimizing risk rather than taking risk. And this also goes back to, for example, choosing the industries. So for example, when we develop something, of course, I'm looking at industries that have, huge potential and there's chance that we'll grow. But also I'm kind of like thinking which industry is kind of like risk proof, if you understand what I mean. So for example, you wouldn't want to go into something hyper niche or like hyper risky, but maybe there's some other industry that's sort of already like stable and like consistently growing. And instead of going for the, super risky option, I would stick to kind of like the one that is already there and has a lower chance of disappearing in the next like year or two. So I love taking risk, but I guess once again, on a micro level, you actually, as an entrepreneur, you avoid a lot of risk in general, and that's how you essentially survive. And I guess it's the same in life, in many sort of situations, you actually survive by minimizing risk, right? Like, I don't know, that's why you don't go, I don't know, do some kind of like crazy stuff. Of course you can take risk and travel and do stuff, but like, do you really need to jump, without a parachute and then like catch another parachute while you're flying? Probably not, right? So that's kind of like my thinking around like taking risk, understanding where is sort of enough of risk really.
That's such an interesting answer. And I've never thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense. Like on the macro level, people consider being an entrepreneur risky, but everything about being an entrepreneur is actually limiting risk once you've taken that initial
Yep.
risk going down some sort of unknown path or pursuing a project.
Yep.
Now, you're currently working on 2 companies. Oh, yes, go on.
No, last thing, like I want to say, like even, when we approach any projects, I'm always like thinking about the worst case scenario. So like when I actually, can I kind of like consider any costs, any capital that we use, I'm always thinking like about the worst case scenario, meaning that, my worst case scenario is always an assessment of my maximum risk. And if my worst case scenario kind of like goes above my sort of expectations or sort of my comfort zone, it's not even the comfort zone, to be honest, it's more kind of like just risk assessment, then I try to find ways to minimize it. So that's the thinking around this.
Yeah, it's so important to think that way, and I don't think many people do. Now, you're currently working on 2 companies, but before then, you started one called the Mindful Store. What
Yeah.
was it and how did it work?
So once again, straight out of uni, and also consider that I was doing environmental management, my friends and I, we decided to launch something. And to be very honest with you, we didn't know what exactly we wanted to launch. What we knew is that because there was basically me and two of my other friends, one of them was also actually doing environmental management as well. So We just thought that we needed to launch something. That was kind of like the macro idea. And of course, ideally, because, we graduated doing environmental management, we kind of like wanted to capitalize on that sustainability wave. And, I know it probably sounds weird, but because we knew so much, we thought, yeah, we need to stick to sustainability, but we need to find ways to make it commercially viable. Because the bigger problem that I saw, while I was studying, like everyone talks, for example, about sustainability, but it's not really gaining that kind of like mass adoption. It's not really gaining that, critical traction, I would say. So what we thought, and once again, this is straight out of uni, first we actually saw at university, there was this competition called Venture Further, and this is run by our Manchester Business School. So, and the competition is pretty simple. They have like 4 or 5 different categories. One of them is environmental impact at that time. And we thought, hey, we just want to participate in this competition because the prize was, I think it was £12,000. 12 or 13,000 pounds. There's actually articles online as well. I can send you some later. That's pretty cool. There's a video as well. So we thought, hey, the first idea was to participate in that sort of competition, honestly, without even knowing what we're going to do. And hopefully, sort of the director of the school, Lynn Shepherd, she won't sort of listen to this podcast because, yeah. But anyway, so we thought, hey, this would be pretty cool to participate in this. And then we kind of like started thinking sort of, I would say like kind of like reverse engineer the whole process and thinking, what could we do? Of course, as a business, like don't get me wrong, not just for the competition, but the competition itself, I guess it was not just a competition. It was more kind of like an accelerator / competition. Sort of that's why we were thinking like, okay, let's find something, let's figure out something that would work for this competition specifically. We would have a chance to win those 12K and we would launch something. So based on, once again, that we, graduated doing environmental management, we thought to launch a modern, what we call modern day retail store, but not a simple one. It's basically retail as a service. What this means in simple terms, there's 2 things that were fundamental to this like physical pop-up store. First thing, all brands pay subscription for space in the store. So let's say if you want a shelf or something, you pay. So at that time it was like £200 to £300 per month. So if if you're launching a brand, you don't know anything, you could approach Mindful Store and you could rent sort of a shelf and you get some space for £300 a month, and we don't take anything from sales at all, 0. So you just pay for that subscription. That was kind of like the whole idea behind that, because our thinking was, first, we would allow, with this kind of like model, we would allow, sort of sustainable brands to enter the market immediately. Super simple. As long as their product sells, they keep all of the revenue. Like we literally didn't take anything from that revenue. And the second idea, kind of like the second feature you could call, apart from the, sort of subscription as a service, is you could call it kind of like, it was going towards kind of like data-driven shop, meaning that, next to each product, we had a specific, sort of sign, and then there was a QR code that also led you to sort of discovering everything about the product, the origin, the history behind it, the supply chain, and everything else. So the whole idea was slowly, going towards a very, very data-driven shop, so that you as a person could actually understand, how the product was produced, where it was produced, and essentially, how we talk about blockchain. And actually, that's the connection to blockchain, to be honest with you. So you would actually know straight away by scanning the QR code, everything about the product. And the vision was actually to, transfer it eventually to blockchain. So that imagine when a farmer produces something, on a farm, and then, sells it to a store, and then the store sells it, and so on and so on. Everything would be recorded on the blockchain. And then you scanning that QR code on in the store, knowing immediately all of the truth about the supply chain and everything else behind the product. That was the vision, and that's how we started. And that's probably now you could kind of like understand the link between, we'll go into Web3 for sure. Like I know all of the blockchain stuff, but at the end of the day, the concept was amazing. Honestly, like people loved it, but the business and the math behind it didn't work out. So we weren't able to scale. So we had that pop-up store for like, I would say half a year, and then we just shut it down. Yeah, so that's how it all started, really.
That's fascinating. And what lessons would you say you learned from starting a company like this?
And also, just to add, we actually won that competition. So we got those 12K by actually winning that competition. And that helped us finance that store that we actually built. So once again, a
Shit.
huge thank you to our, business school, Manchester Business School. That's how it started. But once again, your question was, sorry, interrupted you.
My question was, what lessons did you learn from starting a company like this?
Look, I mean, to be honest, I think I'm too young of, to kind of like give advice and like say, yeah, this is how it should be, this is how it works. But overall, I think it wasn't even a lesson. It was more kind of like the best thing about this was just entering the market because, I've even seen some of your content on that as well, that, people kind of like sometimes are afraid to sort of, you know, make, sort of take that first step, right? And because of that competition, and they gave us, the money for that store, and kind of like we wanted to build it anyway, it gave, like, I think it gave just that massive confidence boost to get started. So I'm not sure if I can even say that's a lesson. I mean, of course you can, I can come up with so many, sort of lessons from that, failure and not being able to scale and not understanding business models, the math behind it. But to be very honest with you, I think the main thing about this was just kind of like entering the, let's call it, business world, even at such a small scale, and just understanding that, yep, it is what it is. You can fail, because even after Mindful Store, I would say it was kind of like easier to transition to something else, because once you're in, and even if it fails, I was just thinking, okay, what else could we do? What else could we offer? That type of thinking, really. And I think that was the biggest, not even lesson, just kind of like the confidence boost once again.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of transitioning to something else, the next company you started was TGR Agency.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about what the company does?
So TGR, the Green Republic, is a modern day tech agency. And we, to be honest, we work on just so many things. We started off though, purely just with smart contracts. That's how it all started. So at the beginning, we were just focusing on Web3 tech, especially at that time in the UK. To be honest, like, I think at best, like 3-4 companies, like 3 people, 3-4 people worked on that. So, one day I was just approached by a team and said, "Hey, can you help us, sort of with the smart contracts?" So, yep, cool, we can do it. Because once again, just going back to environmental management, a lot of the stuff, for noise pollution, air pollution, all of the apps, they run on Python, right? And that's the basis for many of the blockchain languages as well. So I guess that also kind of gives you an understanding of like why that transition was kind of intuitive, accidentally, I would say. So that's how it started. Like, we were purely working on, smart contracts, minting dApps, like wallet integrations, like all of that stuff. So purely Web3. But lately, we've just been expanding to more and more stuff, I would say. And, we'll get to talk about that, I guess, as well. Like the Kreoverse, the other company sort of service agency that we manage. Like, we've expanded, our offerings to avatars, AI chatbots, of course, kind of like more custom tech. So actually, like, seriously, I've been thinking a lot lately, like what TGR represents, because once again, if 2 years ago this was a purely Web3 agency, the tricky thing now is the Web3 thing worked as a great kind of like intro once again, and like it worked, and we managed to build so many projects and just a huge sort of network around Web3, right? But now it's funny, like, how people come even to us as TGR, even asking for non-Web3 tech. And a lot of the projects we're focusing on are, to be honest, now even, not Web3. So now you could say we're kind of like a, boutique, that's the fancy word, a boutique tech agency that focuses on emerging tech, which is true. So we build a lot of, different tech now, Web3, Web2 stuff as well, AI, sort of that emerging, a lot of different emerging tech. That's how I would, phrase it at the moment.
That's fascinating. And how did you, so you, was your entry into the Web3 world from learning about blockchain in the previous business, or were you already involved in the space? How did you get into it and learn about it?
So, look, during Mindful Store, I guess, look, I can't say, and this will be just like a lie if I say, yeah, I was like super involved. No, I was always curious. And like, that's why we were kind of like discovering that whole QR code thing, how you could track all of the supply chain and all of that. So I guess that was my sort of education stage, let's call it that. Um, you know, but then once, I thought, hey, this could be interesting. I got really active on Discord. To be specific, when like, if you remember, I know you do, times when like people were like really, really active on Discord. I would go on many kind of like developers chats and many just like projects chats. And then when something came up in a group, in a conversation, I would just get back to people. I would reply, say hi, help out with something, brainstorm. And I would say it all mostly started in Discord at the beginning. That's how TGR, you could say, started. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember spending countless hours on Discord, trying to learn about the next NFT project and just chatting. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot about like community building and what a thriving community looks like, and like incentives and gamification and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just by like everyone sort of entered the space kind of with the idea that they want to just make a quick buck. And most people ended up just staying and sticking around because they realized like the value of the tech and how interesting it is and just the people they met and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's like the good old days. I now go into my Discord servers just to check if any projects are doing anything vaguely interesting, and it's like a ghost town. It's so quiet.
It's,
So
things have changed.
what's what's your view on the future of Web3 and where it's going?
Look, and the interesting thing is, a lot of people ask and say now, hey, do you think like NFTs are dead? And honestly, as you're running a Web3 driven agency, that's how we launched. Of course, we build, a lot of other tech now. The interesting thing is NFTs are not dead. They're dead in a form sort of that was 2 years ago. Those kind of like just random pictures, random roadmaps, random stuff. That's it. But I'll give you an example so that we could, kind of like you could understand sort of my logic and my sort of way of thinking about this. So recently, not that long ago, just like 3 months ago, we actually worked on a project for Cathay Pacific. The airlines, they're massive in
Hong
sort of
Kong.
Asia. And Hong Kong. Yeah, exactly. So we worked on a project for them and we launched a collection. So their pilots, they have unique watches made from real Boeing's wings. So like that real steel that they use, aluminium or whatever, right? So they have real personal watches. And I think Cathay Pacific issued, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was like 740 watches, right? So each pilot has that like unique watch with a unique engraving on top. What we did for them is we issued a digital certificate to each pilot for that specific watch. So now, each pilot has that real watch, like the physical watch itself. But then, also there's that NFT that proves ownership of that watch. So once again, what we are seeing with companies, enterprise businesses, they are testing ways of issuing these digital certificates, right? And the vision is, once again, not just my vision, just by talking to so many brands, is at some point, a digital certificate will be exactly the same like a paper certificate. So when you go to try and resell your, like physical watch, instead of showing your paper receipt, you'll show the NFT. But once again, let's call it token. You'll show your token that proves ownership of that watch specifically. So I guess overall, we're going more and more towards kind of like practical use cases. The only thing I'm really not sure about whether NFTs will be really used again as a sort of crowdfunding mechanism. Let's call it that, crowdsourcing mechanism that drives the whole sort of financial bit of the project, and incentivizes people to invest, and then the valuation of NFT grows, and so on and so on. I'm not sure about that side of it. Maybe yes, maybe not. Not sure. But when we're talking about something like digital receipts and like just tokenizing physical products, I think for sure. But once again, it's like, if you tokenize like a real, let's say concert ticket, a generic, average user consumer wouldn't even ever know that that's an NFT. So what I think that, NFTs and tokens are going to have many, many use cases. But once again, it might be the case that a consumer will not even see those NFTs and understand that that is an NFT. It's just a ticket at the end of the day. So that's how I see the space now.
And yeah, I agree with you. I think that is where the space has shifted, because of also that whole crowdfunding aspect you mentioned. It's not sustainable anymore because of like zero royalties. And that was their whole roadmap and business plan was based on getting royalties in perpetuity. And so it's not really a thing anymore. But I agree, it's going to be used for real world use cases and replacing physical things and just putting them turning them into digital. But like the word NFT, I see a lot of companies are shying away from using that phrase, and it's now sort of becoming digital collectible or token, which also makes sense because NFTs is quite an isolating term. It's confusing right off the bat, and so people just sort of distance themselves from things that confuse them. On the project that you worked on with Cathay Pacific, I just out of interest, where did the pilots keep this token? Was it in a custodial wallet? Did they use a MetaMask wallet? How did that work?
So that worked when we deployed the smart contract. I think, each pilot set up their own MetaMask. And there was a bit of education, as you could probably understand, around that whole topic of setting up a MetaMask wallet and all of that. And then once we deployed that specific smart contract, all of the NFTs sort of were airdropped to all of the pilots directly. That's how it worked. Okay. Yeah.
Quick interruption from me. The podcast is starting to gain traction, which is amazing. And thank you so much for the support. If I could ask you to do one little thing, could you please rate this podcast on whichever podcast platform you listen on? That little action goes a lot further than you think and would really help the podcast grow. Thanks in advance. I really appreciate it. Back to the episode. Awesome. And how big is the team at the moment?
So at the moment, look, in terms of like full time and actually the team working behind TGR, but to be honest with you, even with Kreoverse, so you've probably seen, the Kreoverse, sort of the let's call it agency that we specifically run and sort of advertise AI chatbots, AI avatars. It's exactly the same thing behind both of the agencies. It just works for us better. Let's call it for advertising purposes, to be honest with you, just to keep it separate for now. But even lately, I'm thinking a lot about like going back and just keeping everything under TGR, under the Green Republic. Let it be, as I said, in a fancy way, a boutique, tech agency, emerging tech. So at the moment, once again, two things. Roughly, it's 15 people in total, and then we also have freelancers and kind of like part-time people that we just hire for a specific project. That's how it works, and the team consists of back-end developers, front-end developers, QA, two project managers, and then we even have a video guy in our team as well. So that's why you're probably seeing some of our content, and he is actually here as well. So yeah,
awesome. Yeah, I have been watching your content, and it's very well made. So if you can hear me, I'm saying well done. What was the hardest part about scaling your business to the size it is now?
Look, I mean, first of all, just a kind of like, I guess, a disclaimer. We're still scaling, and like for me, we're still not there. Um, we're still growing and doing stuff. Here's my learning, and something that I'm thinking a lot about lately is, as you get to a point where you can kind of like survive, you've got money kind of like for food. I mean, for everyone, for food, for flat, and then basic stuff, right? I think the challenge is really being selective in what you do and how you do it, because there isn't going to be a magical way how you reach to millions and millions of dollars. And this is why, for example, and I know we'll discuss this is why, for example, lately we've been working on something like Pangea ID, and we've closed an investment round for that as well. So our thinking now around TGR, and once again, knowing that it's the same team behind Kreoverse, it's kind of still that TGR is the main sort of company, right? I see myself and our team being two things. Of course, we are a service business. We provide services to businesses and help them build sort of apps, whatever, like websites, whatever, using some emerging tech. But the second side of the business, what I want to and I want to focus more and more on that now, is being, let's call it, a sort of an incubator. And that's where something like Pangea is our first real, you could say, use case. Actually, no, it's not the first use case. It's the second one. We have had Stadio before. That's a Web3 marketplace, VC funded as well. And essentially, our entire team is the team behind Stadio as well. It's a Web3 marketplace for enterprise businesses. And this is the second really sort of example right now with Pangea. It's exactly our team from TGR. We've been sort of incubating this company for the last 6 months. 2 weeks ago, I think we've closed this first round. We're preparing for another one later on this year. And I can already see we have a fully working product we've built, and we're slowly kind of like figuring out the business and treating it as a very, very separate thing. So I hope that answers your question. Being selective about what we do and how we do, because my aspiration is that something like Pangea can become it is already, like, actually it's a separate company, and the whole idea of sort of making it successful is very based around capitalization of the entire company, rather than a one-off check to your agency and then you provide a service. Different strategies, I guess, really.
Yeah. And so you've touched on it a few times and also mentioned Pangea. Can you just elaborate on Kreoverse and what that does, and then also this project that you're working on that you just got VC funding for? Congratulations, Pangea Pass.
So once again, like as I said, I would treat sort of Kreoverse very, very closely, and sort of really connected to TGR, right? Just keeping it very straightforward and on. But as part of Kreoverse, we build AI chatbots and AI avatars. So in real time, if you are a business, let's say hotel, and you need an AI avatar, essentially what we do is we build custom, let's call it AI wrappers. That's what it is in essence. So we would, take something like GPT-4, but we would build a custom database on top, maybe some unique experience on top, and then put it all together. So, for example, we have a lot of businesses now, even, hospitals. We have just many businesses in hospitality coming to us and saying, hey, we want something like ChatGPT, but also, apart from the generic knowledge, we want the bot to know our specific, 50 pages of a PDF, so that the consumer actually could talk to the bot based on those things. That's what Kreoverse essentially does. Once again, specifically AI chatbots, AI avatars. But then once again, Pangea is very, very, I guess, different. It also is kind of like based on the whole idea of emerging tech, all of the fancy technology that exists out there, but it's an ID verification startup. So what it does is you literally open the app, and then you can place your passport on top of the app, and it literally in real time extracts all of the info from the chip inside of your passport into the app, meaning that you can save it to your profile, and then you can verify yourself with any businesses that we work with. For example, like our long-term vision is, of course, something like airlines or even the UK borders. Imagine if you can just scan your QR code, done. That's it. You don't need to carry the passport around yourself. But For example, very, I guess, practical use cases already. We have some lending companies, we have some brokers, we have some fintech companies that want to verify their users um, without really checking the physical documents. And the reason, for example, why they would want to allow something like Pangea is because when we extract all of the information from the chip directly, there's 0% risk of fraud. And if you know, sometimes, for example, you have to verify yourself, like, like taking a photo um, and then just sending that to the app. That's an example of when many things could go wrong, because fraud is massive when it comes to, it's called OCR, when just like a camera takes a photo of your passport. So this is why we're building something, as I said, called Pangea. The idea is that we'll keep adding more and more documents to Pangea so that you could verify yourself, meaning you could add your driving license so that then you could go to the rental company and actually rent a car just by sharing your QR code. And that's, I guess, a very, very simple way to verify yourself. So that's the thinking around Pangea ID, being able to verify yourself, minimizing fraud and all of the risks for anyone else. And also the last thing for you to know, I guess what could be just interesting to know, my whole thing, and I guess one of my incentives behind launching Pangea is that you know that like all of the companies just resell all of your data. Like we know all of that, right? So what we're trying to also do with Pangea ID is whenever you share that, QR code with a business, let's say you share with that, I don't know, rental company, whatever, you get to set how many weeks or years they are allowed to hold that data. So that the moment, that sort of date expires, they won't hold any of your data and their data will disappear from their CRM. And that's why we're also developing like Pangea CRM, so that businesses could actually only have access to your information based on, did you give access for 2 weeks, a month, 6 months? So that's another problem we're trying to tackle with Pangea ID, not just the ID verification bit, but also like actually you owning your data and like having control over it. The last thing, just to add as well, I think would be interesting. We're probably the first app that similar to MetaMask. Actually, the idea came from once again like MetaMask and all of the Web3 stuff. Even though we don't really use all of the Web3 language for Pangea, of course, we store all of the data on your phone only. So similar, how you have the the seed phrase and any passwords on your
Yes.
MetaMask. All of the information, none of the passport information actually leaves your phone. So it's only there. It doesn't go to a private server or anything else. It's called local storage, meaning that all of the data you're adding to your Pangea is on your phone and it doesn't leave your phone, similar to Face ID. So yeah, that's what we're building. That's how it works. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, sounds amazing, and it's one of those problems that I think everyone sort of felt like the world was gonna get to at one stage, but like not many people are really tackling it yet. But obviously the tech is getting there, and so I'm really excited to see what comes of it. Just for like my own understanding, in terms of the authentication process, how do you distinguish between, like, say I'm taking a photo of my original passport compared to a counterfeit one? How do you differentiate between the two?
That's the thing. That's the reason why, for example, at the moment, we allow only NFC for passports. Because once again, we do not allow taking photos of the passport. The current setup is that you place your passport on your phone and it extracts all of the information directly from the chip itself. So you are not even able to change any of the information that actually is within that passport. That's how it works. And also the second thing we do, for example, we're still building it though, is it kind of like cross matches with your face as well. So once you've extracted all of the information, we actually then say, hey, Byron, in real time, like, a couple of movements. So we know it's actually you adding your passport to your Pangea ID. That's what we do. And at the moment, we don't do what is called OCR. Once again, when you take a photo of the passport, because that's where fraud is massive. You're right.
Yeah,
There's so many problems with that. That's why we've developed the whole kind of like NFC bit.
that's awesome. That's really exciting. Can't wait to not have to worry about bringing my passport on my travels. Um, so what gives you the confidence that your team can tackle such a big problem like Pangea Pass?
I don't know. It's a good question. I guess the main bit is just we need to be building something that people need. And I know it sounds simple, but look, I'm a very practical and pragmatic guy. Of course, like I want to enjoy building something and that I like, of course. But to be honest with you, it's more about like just building things that people will actually need. I guess that's my incentive, and you could say what gives me the confidence and just energy and anything else really. So as simple as that, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of like idea generation, because I mean, like you're spinning up ideas and seeing where the market's going and sort of creating products in those different markets. What is your process for business idea generation, and do you work on it as a team, and how do you decide whether it's something worth pursuing?
I think I think this is where, I just love running, TGR agency, our agency, because you work with so many clients, because you talk to so many people from many different industries, you are just more agile, I would say. And you understand more things, you learn things about many different industries compared to, you just working in one place, in one industry specifically. So I would say that's where, inspiration comes from and all of the ideas. Um, yeah. And then you just kind of like start connecting things, how things work, because to be honest with you, before I met a couple of people from the ID verification space, I never knew a thing about the ID space, really. Um, but then once you start learning about it, it's kind of like, okay, cool, let's see how this works. Let's see how this works. And now slowly and slowly, I'm learning some of the things too. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And what are your future plans for the business, and like where do you see you guys going in the future?
Yeah. As I said earlier, on this podcast, I think the way I see it and the way, to be honest, I would really love to keep this is having the agency there, TGR agency that, as I said already 2 times, that boutique tech agency,
Yeah.
servicing businesses and helping them grow. Because once again, back to your previous question, that allows you to get all of these insights into many different industries and sort of understand more things in general, right? But then the second thing, similar to Pangea, is actually having this sort of incubator arm, right? Where we could launch more projects, more companies, use all of the agency resources as that launch pad. If that project succeeds and like we test the concept and it works, it becomes a separate company. If it doesn't, well, that's how it works. It dies within this company and that's it. So that's the way I see it. I would like to keep those two things going, the agency bit and then, as I said, the incubator sort of part of it as well. And hopefully the incubator part as well would help us to just, get more founders, more people, more interesting projects. Because the way I see it, in 5 years is if someone has a cool project, they could come to us and say, hey, we want to build this together. Like we don't have the resources, the tech resources or whatever else, or just money as well. And then I would say, if I genuinely like the project and my team likes it, we would say, yeah, that sounds cool. We would get equity in the business. We'll give you the resources. We'll teach you everything we know, help in any way we can, and work together on this. So ideally, you could even call it, I mean, kind of like a VC, but I would still, call it a incubator slash VC because I really want to stay kind of like hands-on rather than just giving money and saying, yeah, here's the money, that's it. We actually want to accumulate all of this expertise within the agency. And then whether you're coming and building, I don't know, an app or anything else, we would at least give you some guidance, share our expertise to help you, once again, to minimize the risk of failing. That's how I see it. Once again, not even like, maximize the potential, of achieving, but honestly minimizing the risk of failure. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well, you've touched on what Kreoverse is doing and how you're working in the AI space. So you're obviously spending a lot of time in the space. And what do you think of the state of the current hype, and what role do you think AI is going to play in our future?
I think, okay, look, even I'll answer your question, but I think maybe this would be a even better answer because you went through Web3 as well. You can see Web3 is clearly down as well. AI is here now, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure after AI, we're going to have, VR, Apple headsets, and then whatever. What I understood for myself is, of course, you need to build, reputation and credibility and actually show you can deliver things. That's number one. But more importantly, the trend I'm seeing is that slowly clients understand, not even just clients, like people understand that at the end of the day, it's not the tech that helps you. It's something that helps you solve your real business or life problem. So the general trend I think that is sort of happening is that you should look at the problem first and like understand what you're trying to solve and then think, okay, is it Web3 that I'm going to use? Is it AI that I'm going to use this to solve this problem? Or is this just going to be very, basic Web2 tech? I think this is the way it's going to really sort of go because with this pace of innovation, I actually feel that people are getting tired of technology and innovations as well. Because, man, with like every year things coming out and like even us not being able to keep up with everything, I think at some point people will become more tech agnostic, meaning that, of course, hype will be there. I get it, AI, VR, like hype will always be there. But I feel like more and more businesses and people would actually understand that, you should just have more common sense around choosing, the tech you're using, the things you're following. So to be clear and sum it up, really, I think people are going to be more tech agnostic and understand that hype is hype. But at the end of the day, it's all about solving real problems in business or life. If Web3 can solve it, perfect. Let's use Web3. But let's not use Web3 just for the sake of using Web3 to then say, yeah, we're using Web3. Or the same thing with AI, exactly the same. Like if AI doesn't allow you to save more, time or money, what are you really just planning to use AI for the sake of using AI? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it's a very strong narrative that's come out of the Web3 circles at the moment, because so many companies relied on
Yeah,
Web3 as their USP. And the fact that it's just Web3 doesn't matter. And now people are focusing on building Web2 like companies, but utilizing Web3 tech in the background, because no one really needs to know that it is Web3. It's about solving those real problems and getting those customers that want that problem solved. They don't really give a shit about how it's done.
absolutely agree. And this is the trend I'm seeing actually within, once again, our core business, TGR, that clients start to understand as well that, what's different? One quick thing here. With Web3, everyone was like so into the hype, like really, really into the hype. And like, but with AI, I actually think because of Web3 being so recent as well, many clients already have, and just people have already that feeling and understanding that AI hype will go away as well. And that's why I think a lot of people are kind of like trying to be smarter already, understanding that the hype will go away, but at the end of the day, how are you going to solve your specific problem and use case?
Yeah. So it's another tool in the toolbox, and something you consider when you're attacking a problem. But you also have to weigh up the pros and cons and whether AI or Web3 is even necessary to solve it.
Yep, yep,
Um.
yep, exactly.
So would you say, well, you're extremely busy, it seems, and would you say you have a good life balance? What are you prioritizing at the moment?
And I'm just trying to prioritize, life, staying alive, eating, sleeping like normal people. But then, of course, as I said, back to back to my main point. I think at this point of time, we just have to be more selective on what we work on, because previously, I mean, I don't personally believe in balance, honestly, because I enjoy, for example, in my case, I enjoy 90% of time just working, and then 10% of time just doing random stuff. I don't know. So in my case, it actually works. But what I can tell you for sure, even within just work, is we have to be more selective, who we work with, the projects we're focusing on, because we understand that, you could focus on this and, potentially there would be some scale. But for example, we know if we take up this project, there's no future. We would just, allocate our resources and it won't be that efficient because it's not, sort of not a long-term client. So to sum it up, look, honestly, I'm not the guy who can really share any advice on like work-life balance, because I always have like so many random calls. Even when I was thinking like, yeah, this is my time off now, I get another random call and we discuss some stuff. So no comments here. I'm not the person to share any useful advice. But I can just say once again, I genuinely enjoy working. Work is a huge part of my life. Whenever I just get tired, I just then chill. I can work, for example, 5, 6, 7 days in a row and then chill for another 3 days, and that would be fine. So for me, I guess it's more kind of like intuitive. Whenever I feel that I'm getting tired, then I just, go for a walk, I don't know, get coffee or something else. And that's it. So pretty much very, very intuitive. No rules or kind of like any, I don't know, any structures or anything like that.
But I think it is so important that you find something that you really are passionate about or enjoy. So the line is a bit blurred, and it like work doesn't seem like work. And I find that with a lot of people who are successful, they really enjoy what they do. So it doesn't really feel like they're working because they enjoy it so much. And it seems like that's where you're at the moment.
No, for sure. Like I genuinely enjoy it, as I said. And that's why there's no like, line between work and life. But as I said already, like it's pretty intuitive. I really rely on just kind of like internal feelings. And then if I feel tired, stressed, then I don't work really. I mean, unless it's an urgent call and I have to be there, cases like that.
Yeah. So my closing question is, I tend to flip things around and ask if you have a question for me.
Okay. Because I know you've been doing this like podcasts and you're trying to keep up for this entire year. You've already spoken, I've seen, to at least like 10, 15 people. Be honest. And what was the most practical advice that you've heard, whether it's an entrepreneur, freelancer, or just, person working at a job, right? Practical, but something that could be implemented literally right now. So not something like, sort of be patient and then that will pay you back in 5 years, but like something that could be like I could use literally once I get, off this call.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Something practical. I'd say one thing I'm looking into as soon as possible, although I haven't implicated it yet, is to delegate in terms of time. Because this podcast takes up a lot of extra time, after work hours, I'm editing episodes and stuff like that. And that side of things, I see it as a means to an end. Because although I enjoy it and I get to listen back and learn from my speaking and what can I improve on, as soon as I can delegate the editing of this podcast, I will do so. Like I've got some people who have outreached in my emails by putting the podcast out there. And so that is something that's on my radar to implement ASAP, basically. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does.
It was a tough one.
So basically like delegating whenever you can straight away.
Yeah, as soon as possible. It's just like valuing your time and like I know opening up that amount of time will give me more freedom to dream and scheme of maybe working on scaling this podcast or scaling my newsletter. And like those are big picture things that I definitely want to prioritize. But you need to have the podcast out there in the first place in order to scale. And so I'm working on the things that just put it out there rather than the big picture things that I'd like to prioritize.
Oh, perfect. Love it. Thanks for the advice.
No problem. And thanks for joining me today, Vlad. I really enjoyed our conversation. You've worked on some amazing projects and got your fingers in many pies. And I'm really excited to
Yes.
see what comes of it all, particularly Pangea Pass. So before we go, if people want to learn more about you and your companies and follow your journey, where can they do so?
I think all of my social media is Vlad TGR. So LinkedIn, just feel free to reach out. You can go to our website as well, tgr.agency. But if this was useful and anyone has any questions at all, feel free to DM me, ask any questions, how we build stuff, what we do, or if there's, any other ways how I could help you. Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for your time, Vlad, and speak soon. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Byron. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.